This is K.M. Weiland, and you are listening to the 605th episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, 9 Negative Character Arcs in the Enneagram. The Enneagram personality theory is a wonderful tool for writers. Beneath the surface of these systems' 9 types, you can find development guides that include all the working parts of solid transformational character arcs. Last week, we discussed the positive character arcs in the Enneagram. Today, we're going to look at the flip side, 9 negative character arcs in the Enneagram system. As a personal development tool, the Enneagram can help us identify first which of the 9 types best suits our own tendencies. And from there, we can use it to bring awareness to any number of our own pain points, growth factors, and potential blind spots. But there is much more to the Enneagram than just that, particularly as presented by Don Richard Riso and Russ Hudson in their groundbreaking book, Personality Types. The Enneagram also offers several vertical maps of progression and regression within each type. In short, it can offer hints as to where someone, ourselves or our characters, may be sitting within a spectrum of mental and emotional health. For our own personal use, the Enneagram can help us move higher up the ladder toward optimal health to achieve positive character arcs. And that's what we looked at last week. As authors, however, we also sometimes need to write about characters who are headed in the opposite direction, away from health. In character arc speak, the thematic movements of a positively arcing character will be away from a lie or limiting belief and toward a more expansive and liberating truth. Meanwhile, a negatively arcing character will be moving away from the story's posited thematic truth. If you're unsure what character arc and theme you want to explore in your story, the Enneagram can help you identify the character arcs, both positive and negative, that are most organic to certain personality types. As I discussed in the last episode, the Enneagram system is a deep well to dive into, full of many complexities. And what's in this episode is the barest ripple on its surface, based on my years-long personal study and growth within the system, and particularly on the type of comparisons and descriptors found in Riso and Hudson's book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. In that book, they introduced the Enneagram like this. The core truth that the Enneagram conveys to us is that we are much more than our personality. Our personalities are no more than the familiar, conditioned parts of a much wider range of potentials that we all possess. So today we're going to take a quick look at the dark side. What happens when someone, a character in your story, is unable to move beyond the limiting beliefs ingrained in his personality? What if, in fact, this character gives in to his fears, pains, delusions, and shadows? The result will be a negative character arc, whether large or small. So following are some key things to keep in mind about the possible devolution of each of the 9 Enneagram types, should you choose to use them in your stories. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, if you're interested in further study, I also recommend the books The Road Back to You by Ian Morgan Cron and Suzanne Stabile, and The Complete Enneagram by Beatrice Chestnut, as well as these authors' respective podcasts, The Enneagram Journey by Suzanne Stabile and Enneagram 2.0 by Beatrice Chestnut and Uranio Paez. Stabile's interview with Russ Hudson, called The 9 Virtues and Passions, is a great place to start diving into the deeper aspects of the theory. So now, here are 9 negative character arcs in the Enneagram. Type number 1, the reformer's negative arc, from resentment to tyranny. The core truth this character fails to believe is you are good. Type 1's native desire to bring integrity to themselves and the world around them can become complicated by an unconscious fear that they are, in fact, inherently bad or corrupt in some way. And this pushes these characters toward perfectionism, first in small ways, and then, if unchecked, into an obsessive tyranny that desires to control others as well. An early sign that this character may be at the beginning of an arc, and it could be positive or negative, is their tendency to judge or condemn both themselves and others. And this may lead them further into the lie that they are personally responsible or obligated to fix everything. And if these tendencies are left unchecked, ones may begin manipulating others by offering correction that attempts to bring others into line with their own personal beliefs and standards. In cases of extreme unhealth, they may end up projecting all the badness they fear in themselves onto others and take it upon themselves to mete out punishment. An example of a comparatively unhealthy type 1 would be Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins. Type number 2, the helper's negative arc, from pride to manipulation. The core truth this character fails to believe is you are wanted. Type 2's native desire to love and be loved can become complicated by an unconscious fear that they are in fact unworthy of love. Defensively, these characters then begin to overgive to others and to overvalue this service, a source of pride, as they conflate the need to be needed with their true need of love. If unchecked, this need to be recognized by others can devolve into outright manipulation of others' needs and emotions. An early sign that this character may be at the beginning of an arc, whether positive or negative, is their tendency to undervalue their own needs at the expense of others. And this may lead them further into the lie that they must give more and more in order to win the admiration, approval, and love of others. If these tendencies are left unchecked, twos may begin manipulating others by seeking to create dependencies, making themselves indispensable so others cannot live without them. And in cases of extreme unhealth, they may end up projecting all the unlovedness that they fear in themselves onto others, causing others to feel that they too are unworthy unless they can, in turn, prove their love to the two. An example of a comparatively unhealthy type 2 would be Cynthia Kirkpatrick in Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. Type 3, the achiever's negative arc, from vanity to grandiosity. The core truth this character fails to believe is you are loved for yourself. Type 3's native desire to offer value to the world can become complicated by an unconscious fear that they are in fact without inherent value, that their only value is what they do, not who they are. Defensively, these characters then begin to chase after success and external affirmation as a way of pumping up their own self-image. If unchecked, this image consciousness can devolve into delusions of grandeur. An early sign this character may be at the beginning of an arc, whether positive or negative, is their tendency to hide their authentic selves by trying to become an ideal. And this may lead them further into the lie that they must climb higher and higher on the ladder of power, prestige, and success. If these tendencies are left unchecked, threes may begin manipulating others by adopting whatever mask will be most acceptable or charming, allowing them to push toward their own end goals. And in cases of extreme unhealth, they may end up arrogantly projecting all the unworthiness they fear in themselves onto others, believing they are better than others and treating them with contempt. An example of a comparatively unhealthy type 3 would be Cal Hockley in Titanic. Type 4, the individualist's negative arc, from envy to self-obsession. The core truth this character fails to believe is you are seen for who you are. Type 4's native desire to be authentically themselves can become complicated by an unconscious fear that they have no true personal significance or identity. Defensively, these characters then begin to hide behind a victim mentality that leads them to envy the perfect lives of others, or to hide behind romantic daydreams about what their lives could be. If unchecked, this envy can devolve into self-indulgent self-obsession. And an early sign this character may be at the beginning of an arc is a tendency to turn inward, refusing to move past injuries and even seeking to intensify their feelings. This may lead them further into the lie that they are somehow too special or unique for the rest of the world to ever understand or appreciate. If these tendencies are left unchecked, 4s may begin manipulating others by becoming more and more temperamental, demanding others treat them with kid gloves. In cases of extreme unhealth, they may end up projecting the fear that they are nobodies onto the world around them, treating others with disdain. An example of an unhealthy type 4 would be Emma Bovary in Madame Bovary. Type 5, the investigator's negative arc, from avarice to reclusion. The core truth this character fails to believe is your needs are not a problem. Type 5's native desire for competency and usefulness can become complicated by the unconscious fear that they lack the ability to interface with the world. Defensively, these characters then begin to conserve their personal resources, avarice, quote unquote, believing the world will demand too much from them. If unchecked, this lack mentality can devolve into self-imposed isolation. An early sign this character may be at the beginning of an arc is their tendency to overthink their own personal experiences and to value the subjective over the objective. And this may lead them further into the lie that they cannot risk giving away too much of themselves, their time, their energy, or their expertise, to an unappreciative and unrewarding world. If these tendencies are left unchecked, 5s may begin manipulating others by detaching emotionally and retreating into their own preoccupations. In cases of extreme unhealth, they may end up projecting their fear of incompetence onto the world around them, in turn making others feel stupid. And an example of a very unhealthy 5 could be Saruman in The Lord of the Rings. Type 6, the loyalist's negative arc, from anxiety to dogmatism. The core truth this character fails to believe is you are safe. Type 6's native desire for safety and security can become complicated by the unconscious fear that they are unable to offer themselves the support and guidance they need in order to feel safe. Defensively, these characters then begin to increasingly rely on external authorities and systems of belief. If unchecked, their anxiety can devolve into a frantic adherence to dogma. An early sign this character may be at the beginning of an arc is the tendency to make themselves dependent on people or systems who they perceive as stronger than themselves. And this may lead them further into the lie that they are incapable of thinking for themselves or even taking care of themselves without external aid. If these tendencies are left unchecked, 6s may begin manipulating others by complaining and testing their loyalties. In extreme cases of unhealth, they may end up projecting their fears onto the world around them, in turn undermining the strength and faith of others, seeking to render them helpless. An example of a comparatively unhealthy type 6 could be Elizabeth Poldark from Poldark. Type 7, the enthusiast's negative arc, from gluttony to escapism. The core truth this character fails to believe is you will be taken care of. Type 7's native desire for happiness can become complicated by an unconscious fear that they are in fact likely to suffer deprivation or pain. Defensively, these characters fixate on seeking positive experiences to the point of gluttony and avoiding any and all negative experiences. If unchecked, this desire for fun and abundance can devolve into hedonistic escapism. An early sign that this character may be at the beginning of an arc is the tendency to fixate on a happy future to the exclusion of the past or present by counting down their lives to the next good thing. And this may lead them further into the lie that their best life is always someplace else, over the horizon and just out of reach. If these tendencies are left unchecked, 7s may begin manipulating others by distracting them from real issues or from negative situations they do not wish to acknowledge. In cases of extreme unhealth, 7s may end up projecting their fear of being trapped onto the world around them, in turn making others feel trapped or deprived in some way. An example of a comparatively unhealthy type 7 could be Alexei Vronsky in Anna Karenina. Type 8, the Challenger's arc, from intensity to violence. The core truth this character fails to believe is you will not be betrayed. Type 8's native desire to feel protected and self-sovereign can become complicated by the fear that they are vulnerable to being controlled or harmed by others. Defensively, these characters push back as a way of feeling their own strength and invulnerability. If unchecked, this desire to feel safe via the intensity of their own experience can devolve into reflexive aggression. An early sign this character may be at the beginning of an arc is the tendency to try to forcefully control everything and everyone in their lives. And this may lead them further into the lie that they must struggle in order to accomplish anything. If these tendencies are left unchecked, 8s may begin manipulating others by exerting dominance over them and using force, even if just the force of intense personality, to get others to comply with their demands. In cases of extreme unhealth, they may end up projecting their fear of being harmed or controlled onto the world around them, in turn bullying others into submission. An example of an unhealthy type 8 would be Catherine Pierce in The Vampire Diaries. And type 9, the Peacemaker's negative arc, from apathy to disassociation. The core truth this character fails to believe is your presence matters. Type 9's native desire to be at peace with everyone and everything can become complicated by an unconscious fear that they are in fact irreparably separate from others. Defensively, these characters sink into lethargy and apathy as a means of avoiding the pain of conflict. If unchecked, this desire to avoid conflict can devolve into a failure to stand up for themselves or issues they believe in. An early sign this character may be at the beginning of an arc is the tendency to avoid allowing themselves to feel impacted or affected by their experiences of the world. And this may lead them further into the lie that in order to avoid the further separation they feel when in disagreement with others, they should suppress their own needs and identities to avoid conflict. If these tendencies are left unchecked, 9s may begin manipulating others through passive resistance and by ignoring the realities of certain situations. In cases of extreme unhealth, they may end up projecting the fear that they will lose connection with others onto the world around them, in turn cutting off connection with those who love them. An example of an unhealthy type 9 would be Tommen Baratheon in The Game of Thrones. So as you can see, the seeds for negative character arcs in the Enneagram are just as rich as are those for positive arcs. Now, it's important to note that although these negative tendencies represent core struggles for the types, the presence of these traits or inclinations are not in themselves indications that someone is on a negative arc. Indeed, as noted, the negative aspects of a type will be present at the beginning of both negative arcs and positive arcs. Whether you choose to take your characters on a positive journey out of their shadow selves or on a negative journey deeper into their darkest possibilities is up to you and the stories you're wanting to tell. Once again, for more on the deep complexities of each type's development and potential, I recommend checking out some of the wonderful resources that I mentioned previously. And I hope you will stop by the site where you can find links to those resources and tell me your opinion. Do you think you might ever write one of the negative character arcs in the Enneagram? If you'd like to be part of the word player community over on my site and join in the conversation on this subject, be sure to stop by the website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. You can always find a transcript of the most recent podcast and add your voice to the discussion by visiting the first post on the site's homepage. And don't forget that if you're looking for an older post, you can always find those by putting the podcast title in the search field at the top of the right-hand column. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Amazon Music, or whatever your favorite podcast platform may be. And if you'd like to do something to support helping writers become authors, it always means a ton if you're able to leave just a quick rating or review on your site of choice. Also, many thanks to those who support my work on Patreon. Your patronage helps make helping writers become authors and its many resources available to writers everywhere. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can find out more at patreon.com/kmweiland. Thank you so much for listening to the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast, and be sure to check back again next week.